It's Take on the World TV, and everybody by now knows what that means. If you're here, of course, it's Disputed Lands. It's time for Disputed Lands. I am encouraged tonight to have my good brother with me here tonight, Adam Wegman. Adam and I have gotten to know each other over the last year, not through phone calls, though we've had a couple phone calls, but back and forth through messages via Facebook. Adam and I really click as brothers. I get along with this guy so well, and I've been following his journey. If you can look there right on your screen, you will see that Adam and his wife Joanie have an Instagram, and they also have a YouTube channel, which I'm gonna. I couldn't put up the link because I don't know on here because I don't know that anybody would type that out anyway. But they also, it's in the description below. If you go onto YouTube and you can find the link in the description there, you can find Adam and Joanie's YouTube. But tonight, Adam has joined us because he has a very interesting, Adam, I don't know. First, welcome to the show, and then I'm going to say something. Welcome, Adam.
Hey, thanks, Chad. I appreciate being here, man.
Good. So Adam, I've heard of bits and pieces of his testimony here, but what I love about testimony is that those testimonies are so powerful. There are so many times where when people are going through different stages of their lives and the hardships that you can feel like you're alone in that. And I remember feeling that way in some instances, physically, spiritually, it was true. But as in being the only one to have ever felt in some manner or another, or have ever dealt with some issue, this or that or the other, you can feel like you're alone in that. And the truth of it is, there's nothing new in the sun. There's someone who's been right where you are. They've experienced the kind of things that you've experienced. And testimony is one of the powerful tools that the Father has given us to share about his grace and his goodness and how he's brought us through those things. So welcome. There's Ian, the Almighty's Duck, Fiaducci, who's dropped in. Welcome, Ian. How you doing tonight?
How's it going? Doing all right.
Doing all right. Good. Hey, I'm going to talk to you after the show, so don't blow out of here.
Oh, no.
But Adam has joined us tonight because he's going to share his testimony. I've asked him to come on and share his testimony to talk about his current missionary life that he is living and share with that. And so I think without further ado, Adam, I am just going to let you get right into it for tonight's show. It's going to go by a lot quicker, I think, than what people realize when they finally get in here. And so if you would, Adam, just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and then you can go right into your testimony and share as much as you feel comfortable doing.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Chad. And Ian, you have a killer beard, dude. I love that.
Thanks. Yeah.
His beard needs a whole nother window. I can't do that with StreamYard yet, but we're working on it.
Yeah, he does need his own little pop-up for that thing. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah. So like you said, Chad, we met each other about a year ago and have been just chatting on and off. And it's fun to be on your show. I'm excited. So like you said, I'll get right into it. So I guess I'll start right from the beginning, childhood. Grew up in the great state of Minnesota. And so just Chad and I kind of have a joke about that, but I grew up in just a typical family. One thing that wasn't typical is I was exposed to pornography super young, like 7 years old. And it fascinated me, to be honest. I'm just going to be totally honest about it. So that was, I think everyone is kind of predisposed to a certain sin in their life that Paul talks about, the thorn in his flesh. And that was mine for sure. And so never was drawn to alcohol or drugs or, gambling or any of those things. But that was it for me. Lust was the sin that I tended to lean towards. And so, just seeing those images burn, and they burned into my brain when I was at that young of an age, I kind of had just interesting way I looked at life in general. But just growing up, it was interesting. In high school, I had a bunch of guy friends, and we were super close, and they were all excited about going to church. Now, I grew up Catholic, both sides of my family, and I really didn't get too excited about going to church. I thought it was boring, and that I could say everything the priest was going to say before he said it, and I really didn't see a point. I believed in God. I was not an atheist or anything like that, but all my buddies were super pumped and excited to go to youth group and all these events, and I just couldn't quite understand it. And finally, one day, one of my friends said, "Hey, you should come with us to this youth event, and it's at our church or whatever." Or I think it was a weekend away. And so my parents were good friends with their parents, and they said, "Sure, go ahead. We trust these guys." And I went, and I started to see why they were excited about church and why they were excited about things of the Lord and reading their Bible, which I had never done before. And this is when I was like 15. Excuse me. And so when I turned 16, they kept inviting me to more and more things. I ended up going to a fall retreat, and it was so growing up, spiritual things I didn't even know anything about anything spiritual, the spiritual realm, demonic stuff, any healing, none of that. I had no idea. And when I went to this youth conference, there's probably like 100 and some kids in this auditorium. And there's a guy preaching the gospel. And honestly, it felt like nobody else was there except for me. Everything else faded out, and it was just me and this guy. But there was hundreds of people in the room, of course. And he was talking to me. It was the Holy Spirit talking through him to me. There's no doubt about it. Everything he said was just piercing my heart. And I'm like, whoa. So, they did the typical altar call thing, and I stood up and had them pray for me. And it was incredible. I finally knew what these guys were so excited about. I'm like, wow, God is real. Jesus died for my sins, and it was an exciting time and amazing. Yet that thorn in my flesh still plagued me. And at the same time, so backing up a little bit, these guys went to church with this beautiful young gal who ended up becoming my wife in the future. So that's where I met her, is at this little country church that these guys went to. And so we started dating when we were 16, and went through high school together. And I went to just a tech college 2-year degree, and we dated through that and got married just right after that. So we got married at 20 years old, with me still struggling with that sin the entire time. And this is where things get.
I don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't. I don't want to interrupt you too much here. I can identify that. I shared my testimony this year at Take on the World TV, Adam. I don't know if you've had a chance to see that yet.
I have. It was amazing.
Okay. Well, so you and I, and we've talked about this privately. I can identify so much with what you're saying, and that. So I'm going to let you folks understand it's how brave. You should just think about your own sin, and then you're coming on to a live TV and confessing that before a bunch of people you don't know. It's not an easy thing. So first, thank you, Adam, for allowing us to hear this testimony of your life, because I know it's not an easy thing to share those things that shame us. So I just want people to keep that in mind as Adam shares his testimony. I'll let you go ahead.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and Chad, you've you paved the way for me to do this tonight, and then so many other people before me too. I think it's just there's power in sharing, and no sin can live in the light. So if it's hidden in the dark, it'll just fester and grow, and you bring it to the light, and it has no power. So that's what we're here to do. But yeah, we got married at 20, and this is no joke. So we got married, and that wedding night we stayed at a house that we bought, and the following night we went up to a place just in the middle of the woods on a lake up in northern Minnesota. And like I mentioned earlier, spiritual things were nothing I was familiar with. And so we went to sleep that night, and I had an experience that I'll never forget. It was a demonic attack. And I'm going to actually describe this, if that's okay for people, because I wish someone would have described something like this to me so I knew what was going on. So this was my experience anyway. I went to sleep, or I thought I was asleep. I don't know what state I was in exactly. And everything was black except way off in the distance. I could see this little speck of red. And it was, the stereotypical face of Satan, red face with the horns and the black beard, goatee or whatever. And in just an instant, it came and was right in my face. And then it felt like a wind rushed over me and went into my body. And I woke up absolutely terrified. I was breathing heavy. I was sweating bullets. I woke my wife up, like, Joanie, can you please pray for me? This happened. And I don't think I slept hardly at all that entire week. It was supposed to be our honeymoon, and I was just freaked out pretty much the entire time. And now, hindsight, looking back on that, I think that was Satan's way of saying, I've got you. I know what you're struggling with, and I got you, and I'm going to mess with your marriage big time. And that's exactly what he did. So that happened that night. A month later, we were back at home. That same exact dream happened again. Dream or experience, whatever you want to call it. And shortly thereafter, within our first year of marriage, I was struggling with looking at pornography. My wife confronted me about it. It was super difficult. We actually got separated the second year of our marriage because of it. And it wasn't, some people might think, like, I spent all my days just consuming that garbage. That wasn't it. It was like, semi-infrequent, but it had such a grip on me that it was affecting the way I saw my wife. It was the way it affected the way I had friendships. I really pulled away and didn't want to communicate with people. I didn't want to go out and see friends. And to say that it did all that sounds kind of extreme to somebody, but for me, that's what happened. And it was, so I had that dream again a month later, and let's see. So my timeline's not perfect on all this, but we were separated 3 times overall in the first 6 or 7 years of our marriage. One of those times was for 11 months. One of those times was for 3 months. And one of those times was for about a month. And each time I came back and we tried to work things out, I was having that dream again, but not the same one. I'm going to share one more experience I had. It always happened after we went to sleep. So we were laying down in bed, supposedly sleeping, and we lived in this house that was on a super busy street with a 24-hour gas station right next door. So there was always lights on. It was always bright, and it was always noisy because cars would drive by with their bass and squealing out of there and whatever. And this night, my eyes popped open for whatever reason because I sensed something. And I heard we had this kind of crunchy old carpet, newlyweds and junky stuff that you have. And there was no sound outside. Those lights were still on, but there was no cars, no sounds, no nothing, which was very abnormal. And I heard 2 footsteps on my wife's side of the bed. And then I heard 2 footsteps on my side of the bed. And I was just staring up at the ceiling, and I could hear this because you could hear a pin drop. It's so quiet. And then, but I couldn't see anything. And I don't know if I was too scared or there's nothing there, but I don't remember looking to the sides to see if anything was there. And just a quick side note, I'm in a laundry room at a campground. So if you hear people coming and going or cars going by, that's what's going on. So those 2 footsteps happened. And then I was held down and I could not move. I couldn't lift my neck up. I couldn't, I'm trying to remember, I think my eyes were closed and I couldn't open my eyes. I could barely breathe. It was like somebody was literally, like, it felt like a 300-pound man was on top of me and just squeezing me. I could not move at all. And the same wind that I felt in those other 2 dreams happened again. That wind rushed over me and then it was gone. And then I started to pray. out loud. And that happened. So that that experience happened twice to me as well. So the face happened twice, and then the experience of being held down happened twice as well. And it was, like I mentioned before, not knowing anything about spiritual stuff and what was going on. I started to learn quickly that the name of Jesus is powerful. I started to learn quickly that I had sin in my life that needed to go, like, immediately. And yet it was still a struggle. It was I want to say this to encourage people. Some people out there, you hear about miraculous healings, and they're just like, I had someone pray over me, and I prayed, and the sin was gone. I never struggled with it again. I never touched alcohol again. I never, and so on and so forth. That wasn't the case for me. For me, it was a struggle with my flesh constantly, and it was, I was looking. So I'm kind of a systematic person. I went to school to be a machinist, and I work on jewelry and really small parts and fine motor skill stuff. And so for me, I was looking for a process. Like, there has to be some kind of process. Like, and growing up Catholic too, you say these prayers and your sins are forgiven, or you say you're repentant, your penance, and all that stuff. So that was kind of ingrained in me. And so I was always looking for a process. So I read every book that was out there on sexual sin and pornography. This is back in the early 2000s. And there wasn't a lot out there, but there's a few books. And it was more like practical things, like bouncing your eyes and whatever else. But I never felt like the true gospel message and the power was there in those books, because I did everything they had mentioned. And I still was really struggling with this to a major level, And so the third time we separated, and by the way, I never did find that process to get out of it. I even went to a thing called SA. They have AA for Alcoholics Anonymous.
Sure.
Sex Addicts Anonymous. And I was like, what am I doing here? I don't feel like I belong here. And, it was like something I could go to where these guys I could kind of relate to them, but it was interesting. But the processes are like all these steps, the 12, they attributed the same 12 steps as AA, but to the SA groups, which maybe it worked for some people, but that wasn't what I needed. And so anyway, fast forward, like our 6th or 7th year of marriage, struggling with it again. And my wife was desperate at this point. She's like, I give her a lot of credit. She stuck with me, even though I was no one even to stick with. I was a mess. And she stuck with me, man. She stuck by my side, and I'm so blessed that she did, because she showed the love of Christ to me when nobody else would. And she actually called me out when no one else would too. So that's a part of my story as well. I went to several pastors, and I asked for help. I'm like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Can somebody keep me accountable? Like, yeah, sure, okay. And they would keep me accountable. We communicate for a couple weeks, and then they'd be gone, and I kind of hide again and, get back into stuff. And every time I met with one of these guys, it was like, yeah, every guy struggles with this. It's just one of those things. You'll grow out of it. It's, your wife's kind of making it a big deal. And literally, that is what the counselors and the pastors were telling me. And so I was justified left and right by those guys, and my buddies were like, that's not a big deal. And so everyone was justifying what I was doing. I didn't have a true, a true accountability partner, a true person discipling me as to what a godly man would look like. So my wife, there's one guy that I met with a little bit, and I went to his place and we went over a couple studies and stuff. This is probably in the second separation or first separation, I can't remember. And she called him up and said, hey, like, Adam needs to come and hang out with you. I'm desperate. You gotta just call him and tell him to come stay with you for a couple days. You gotta talk some sense into him. And at this point, I had hardened my heart. Literally, I was like, I'm never gonna change. This is just the way I am. It's, Joanie, that's my wife's name. You're making a big deal out of it. It's fine. And she refused to allow that. She refused to submit to sin. Everyone, and I think this kind of gets turned around a lot, but in Scripture, wives submitting to their husbands, is one thing, but wives submitting to the sin of their husbands is a whole nother thing. And I am eternally grateful to her for not submitting to that sin that I was hurting her with in our life, you know? And so I give her a lot of credit for that. And so she talked to this guy, twisted his arm. He's like, I'm not going to have him come to my place unless he calls me. He's got to want to get better. He's got to want to rid this out of his life. He's got to love the Lord enough to get help himself. And like I said, my heart was hard, and I was like, that's not going to happen. And she twisted his arm enough where he called me up, and he's like, Adam, I think that's how it went. He called me and said, Adam, do you want to come to my place? I'm like, I don't know. I don't really know if I should. You know, kind of gave him all the excuses. And then I don't know how it all happened, but my wife is like, you need to go. So I told the guy, all right, I'm going to go. I'm going to come to your place. I'll be there. I think it was a Saturday, actually. And I'm like, I'll be there at 3 o'clock. So had breakfast with my wife. She took my cell phone, said, you're not going to need this. I'm like, well, how am I going to get a hold of you? You know, and I made all the excuses of why I need my phone. And she's like, nope, you're going to leave it here. So I left it, and I started driving, and I had to make 2 stops to deliver some jewelry on my way down to this guy's place, which was like a 2 or 2.5 hour drive from where I was. And I showed up at like 6 o'clock, 3 hours late. And he opens the door and he goes, Adam, where were you? And so I gave him all my reasons and all my excuses. And he's like, that's unacceptable. You gave me your word you'd be here at 3 o'clock and it's 6. And, you know, what am I supposed to do with that? He's like, if you're going to live under my roof, you're going to be on time and you're going to be a man of your word. And right there was like, you know, at first I kind of had an attitude. I'm like, hey, man, who are you to, you know, talk to me that way and stuff? But I needed that guy in my life. His name is Darren, and I'm just so grateful for him. And so, yeah, he's like, okay, here are the ground rules. I went into his house. I was going to stay there for a week while he went to work. I was going to hang out in the house, and his family lived in another house that they owned like 3 hours away. So it was just him and I for the week. And that week was instrumental in changing my life and seeing who God is and seeing the Messiah as truly the Lord over my life in every aspect of it. Prior to that, it was like, you know, that shirt that says Jesus is my homeboy back in the 2000s and stuff. That was kind of my mentality, and all the people I hung out with, same thing. It's like, yeah, you know, yeah, we're buds, and just so disrespectful now that I look at it. And so during that time, all I had was he had a whole library of Christian books to read and my Bible. And then he said, I'll call you when I'm on my way home, and you'll have enough time to heat up some dinner for us. So every day for that week, he said, oh, and you can't sleep in, what did he say? I think it was 6 o'clock. I couldn't sleep past 6 a.m. And he's like, I don't really care how late you stay up, but you're going to be up at 6 no matter what. Because he left at like 3 in the morning or something crazy. And so 6 o'clock, I'd get up, I'd, you know, do breakfast, and my job was to do all the dishes. Basically, I was like a housewife for the week and, you know, made the meals and stuff. But it was good because I had a schedule, and he was keeping me accountable. Like, he would even stand, this is no joke. He's like, you need to take a shower today? I'm like, yeah, I probably should shower. He goes, okay. All right. Why don't you be in the bathroom in 10 minutes? So I'd shower, and this may sound extreme to some people, but for me, this is what I needed. He'd stand outside the bathroom. I'd leave the door open, and I'd have 5 minutes to shower and get out of there. So he's like, if you're going to take this seriously, let's do this. So I'd 5 minute showers, in and out of there as fast as possible. And it was amazing. Like, the best accountability I've ever had, the most love I've ever felt from anyone. We prayed with each other. We went through devotions and a book, you know, and that's, so my wife recorded a conversation we had when I first got there. Like, the first night we had a conversation, she recorded it on her phone, and I sounded like a jerk, like I usually did. And I think the day before I left his house, she recorded another conversation we had, and my voice was completely different. I mean, completely full of love and grace and mercy, not on my part, but because of what I felt and what God did for me while I was there and how he changed my heart and my perspective, realizing that I wasn't being a man of God whatsoever. I wasn't being a leader in my home. I wasn't being truthful to her. I wasn't upholding, any of the things that God said I should uphold as far as a marriage covenant goes. So I came back from there and I promised her I will never leave you again. And so this is 7 years. We hadn't got pregnant or anything in 7 years. And she desperately wanted a family. And so I get back from this guy's place after a week. Excuse me. And 1 month later, we conceive a baby. And this is after 7 years of marital struggles and all these things. So our daughter was born. We named her Eden, which means delight. And she's truly like a promise to us that our marriage was redeemed and saved once and for all. And yeah, man, that's the testimony I have. So since then, like you said, Chad, sharing this with people and being vulnerable, I think that's where the enemy doesn't want us to go. He doesn't want us to share because there's definitely so much power in getting things out there. And so I just try and open myself up to make myself available to people when they're struggling or they want to talk or whatever. And I don't know how to say this, but it's been kind of disappointing. I'll just be truthful. It's most of the time what happens is women will reach out to my wife and they'll say, hey, my husband is struggling with all these different same things as your husband was. Can you help him? And then I'll get the guy's number, shoot him a text or a message or call him. And that's where it ends. Like the guys, I don't know what it is about us men being prideful or shame. It's full of shame or what it is. But it seems to be that us men have a huge roadblock and a big, I don't know if it's arrogance or pride or shame, like I said, but it's super rare. Maybe 1% of the time, a person will reach out to me, a man will reach out and say, I'm struggling with this. Can we walk alongside each other? And but women reach out to my wife a lot. And yeah.
There's one word that does come to mind immediately when you say that, and it's courage. The model of what a man should be in our culture is desperately lacking. Like you said, this mentor that you had, this guy that came along, those are so few. But on the person's part who is struggling with whatever sin it is in their life, the courage and the desire simply are not there. They're simply not there. We have, in many respects, become a nation of wimps, really, when it comes to modeling what it is to be a man of God, to be someone that shows courage, in the face of whatever it is, to take issues and problems and deal with them, what they used to say is head on, right? This is the bed you made, now lay in it. That saying, maybe it's, not the correct one, but, whatever it is that we have to face, you have to deal with it head on. And we are so used to shirking responsibility, shirking, having consequences, to finding our way around a nation without men who are modeling discipline. You think about it, back in, discipline for our forefathers, and I'm talking about our great-grandfathers and great-great-grandfathers, was necessary to live.
Yeah.
If they were not disciplined in their life choices, that was death. It was death. It was that serious. There were reasons why they did all the things they did throughout the day. They didn't have the time. They didn't have the time for all this nonsense that we have time for in our lives today. They were surviving. And it's typically what happens in a nation that's been blessed with abundance and to be at ease, right? All these terms that click, I think, for us when we read the scripture. They were a nation at ease, right? No enemies attacking from without.
Kills.
And we don't have that model, and we don't understand that itself is something to be at war with. To wake up every day and to be a disciplined mind, to be in prayer, to be in scripture. If you're someone who's leading or discipling, to make sure that you're talking to those people continually, discipling, check on them, right? That you're also or counseling or whatever. Are those any of those things present in your life to where you are accountable to the Father for your actions, and you feel that, you see it, and your life is ordered in that manner? And it's a condemnation to others, but it's also scary to walk in because people are afraid. Look, I said something that was probably about a year ago, Adam, and maybe I think you can probably relate to this as well. Some people have failed so often in their lives that they are afraid to succeed at something. They're afraid to succeed because that's new territory and not something they've ever done, and it's unknown. And so they set themselves up to fail on purpose many times, without even maybe realizing that they're doing that. And I think that kind of is a segue maybe to kind of go into where that's taking you now. So you've had more than one child since then, yes?
Yeah, we have 3 now. Yep.
So you have 3 children, and you and your wife a few years ago, had something laid on your hearts. And why don't you kind of go into that story a little bit?
Okay. Yeah. So this will tie into why I'm in a laundry room at the moment. This is a lot. Everything with me is a long story, but
that's fine. We got time, brother.
Yeah. So, okay. So when things really turned around, when I really was healed and we conceived our daughter, we were in the middle of running a salon and spa that my wife had a dream of having. So the Father granted us this building. We were able to buy it, and she had a salon and spa in this building, and it was like extremely successful for the first 5 or 6 years. And then we had some shady stuff happen with one of the employees, and really small town and all those things. And we found ourselves working that business together with the hopes of retirement and, the American dream, the picket fence, the whole thing. And, by this age, we'll be able to retire. We can sell the business. We can do this, that, or we can pass it on to our children. And when this happened, our income was cut by 70% in 30 days. So, yeah. And then on top of that, we were hearing things about ourselves that weren't true from all kinds of people that we didn't even know. And at first, I'm kind of my wife's very in tune with people, and she can read them really well. And so she's in a grocery store and she'll lock eyes with someone that's been a former person she's done business with, and they turn around and walk the other way. And she was telling me this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I think you're probably reading into it a little too much. And then like 6 months later, we were at a beach, and we ran into someone that was a former, person we did business with, and that I went to shake their hand, and they turned around and walked away from me. That's kind of how much our name got dragged through the mud in that town. And we found ourselves in a place, and I'm not saying that to knock the town or the people. I'm just saying I think all this was part of the Lord's plan, and that's the only reason I'm telling it. Because some people would have saw us as very successful and having it all together. 3 kids, we had a house, we had a business, we had things going, and then it all crumbled. And in fact, I moved my business home. I was doing custom design jewelry at the time, and I moved my business home to focus more on wholesale stuff. And she was just having our 3rd baby at the time. They're just about to have him. And this is a really cool God moment here. So all that stuff crumbled, and we had hardly any income at all. We were barely making our bills whatsoever, and we needed to come up with $3,000 because we did home birth. And our midwife charged $3,000, which is super cheap. But for us at the time, that was like a mountain of money, And I had an old plowing truck for plowing snow, and that year the Lord blessed us with ample amounts of snow And so I was able to plow and make some extra money to pay for that birth. So the birth of our third child was paid for with plowing snow in Minnesota, which is kind of a cool story.
Nice.
Well, if you're going to plow snow, being in Minnesota is a good place to be, I guess.
You betcha.
You betcha.
So from there, the business never really recovered. It was kind of touch and go. I mean, my wife was doing the business basically to keep the doors open. And I asked her, so at this time, so right when all this stuff happened, that next fall, I had dreamt of going to the mountains and just exploring. So she bought me a plane ticket to fly to Idaho. And I met my brother-in-law out there who was from Idaho. And we just went and backpacked and, had a good time up in the mountains for a week. And I came back, and the only thing I could talk about was going out west, and she actually had to ban me from saying the word Idaho in the house because that's all I wanted to talk about. She's like, I'm sick of hearing about it. No, we're not moving there. And I even went so far as, because I wanted to get out of the area we were in. I just wanted to walk away from the business and all the headache that was going on with it. And I was pretty much done. And maybe that's the quitter in me. She's a fighter. She'll stick with anything. Like she stuck with me, So I got to give her credit. And but me, I'm just like, let's get out of here. So I even had a job lined up for myself and everything. And she's like, yeah, I just don't feel like it's the right time. And so I finally put that dream aside, and I'm like, okay, let's just keep slogging this thing out. And 5 years went by, and this prayer came to me one night. It was just, Lord, I don't know where we're supposed to go or what we're supposed to do with this life, but we'll go where you want us to go and do what you want us to do. And that was a very dangerous prayer for me to pray, had I known what we were going to go through or go on to next. But praying that, we started thinking, we really don't like the winters. We love being outside, but we're not big fans of the snow and the cold. And everyone pretty much hibernates for 9 months in Minnesota. So we're like, let's, see if we can venture out of here in the winter, and maybe we can do that every year and establish some sort of business or income stream somewhere else. And so we had one last employee that was working with us, and she agreed to kind of become a manager and run the place while we were gone. And this was in December of 2017, I think. And then I was actually taking the kids to church one night, and she wrote a text to my wife, and it said, "Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a blessing. I left my key under the mat, on the door on the way out. I won't be working for you anymore." And that was it. And this was like 20-some employees we went through in the last 12 or 13 years. And it was kind of like that. It's just kind of the nature of that industry. But my wife just kind of broke down that night. It's like, why is this happening? What is going on? What are we going to do? And I'd asked her this question probably a dozen times prior to this. I said, do you want to keep doing this? Because this is kind of the track record of people and what's been going on. Do you want to keep doing this? Do you think the Lord's, still calling you to do this? And every time she would just quickly answer, yes, absolutely. I don't feel like he's saying to quit. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to praise him in the storm, and I'm going to keep rolling with it. Like, all right. So this night I get back home, and that very same question, put the kids to bed, and we start talking about the situation. And I said, hey, as she's crying about it, because that was our, what we thought was our future. We're going to get out of there in the winters and do our thing. I'm like, do you want to keep doing this? And instantly this time she said, no, I don't. And she started sobbing, and I started sobbing. And because we both knew what that meant, that all that work over the years was going to dissolve, and we were going to move forward with life without that business, which had been my wife's dream since she was 7 years old. The Lord put that on her heart since she was 7. And so she laid it down. And it was not an easy process. But so with that kind of leads us to where we're at today. The Lord shut a bunch of doors in that area. He closed business doors, different churches we were going to, things happened and doors closed. And in fact, the last couple winters have been some of the worst winters Minnesota's had. And so all these doors kept closing, and we knew we wanted to get on the road. And Joanie that night looked at me and goes, through her tears, she goes, let's go do your dream now. because she knew my dream was to go out west and be in the mountains and travel and explore. And so yeah, we sold our house prior to this because we really felt called to sell our place, even though we didn't know why. So we sold the house and then we rented for a year. And we were looking at RVs and different things and trying to figure out what we're going to do. And then somebody mentioned to us, why don't you guys get a bus and, convert it into an RV? So someone just kind of planted that seed, one of our friends. And so once we decided we're going to close the business, I think it was less than a month later, Joanie had done a bunch of research on which buses were good. And we ended up finding one in Montana, and she bought me a plane ticket one way out there. And so I went out there, bought the bus and drove it home 17 hours through the mountains by myself, and started renovating the whole thing and turned it into a tiny home basically on wheels. And so that's what we've been living in for almost a year now. In December, it'll be 1 year since we've been living in this bus.
And tell us now here's the thing that you and I get into. Why?
That is the question, Chad.
It is. I know it's not easy. It's the hot seat, and it's the one that we've actually been talking to each other about.
Yeah.
Why?
No,
why the bus? Why are you doing what you're doing? How do you guys make any income now? How are you feeding this family? What's going on, Adam?
Yeah. So we sold all our possessions except for we do have one storage unit in Minnesota that we have, the stuff we wanted to keep in. And we still have a business building we're trying to sell. Other than that, everything in the bus is what we own, and we tow a car behind it. So 40-foot school bus plus a car, we're at like 63 feet or something crazy. And okay, so the why. We honestly very strongly felt the Lord calling us out of Minnesota, out of the land of familiar. There's a really good book I'd highly recommend called The Dream Giver. And in that book, he tells a parallel story to the children of Israel leaving Egypt. And, we all know the story of Exodus and all the grumbling and complaining and turning their back on God, and then him providing and all those things. And this book he has, or that I read, really paralleled that story well. And it talks about leaving the land of familiar. And that really stuck with me. I lived in Minnesota my whole life. We did move like 2 hours away from where we grew up and more into the lake country, into the woods and stuff. That's where our business was. But we really lived in the land of familiar. Like we knew everything, we knew everyone. And I think we were way too comfortable, to be honest. Aside from the business stuff that happened, life was pretty comfortable. We knew where everything was and, all those kinds of things. So, and praying that prayer, Lord, we'll go where you want us to go and do what you want us to do. I think I started praying that once I got back from Idaho after that trip. So I'd pray that for I think I actually prayed it for 5 years, now that I think about it. And the why of that is honestly a stirring of the Holy Spirit saying, go. And so we went, and we started last December. So we converted the whole bus in 7 months, and we made a tiny salon in the middle of it. So the middle 7 feet of the bus is a salon for my wife. And then we have bunks in the back and our bedroom in the back, and then kitchen and bathroom up front. And we left with kind of a plan. We went down to Arkansas, visited some friends for a week. And the whole time, so our plan was to travel to places that we looked at online that seemed like possible places to live, and pray over those areas as we went through them or as we visited to see if we really felt like we should be there. And so we did that, and we did it in Arkansas, and that just didn't feel right. And we went down to Texas and visited some family, and that just didn't feel right. And we went all over Texas. We went from the north all the way down to Padre Island, actually. And in Padre Island, so here's the cool thing. The why, I don't necessarily have the ultimate answer to that question, Chad. But what I do know is this. The people I have met because of this have become lifelong friends, and I've got to fellowship with them. And we've had some miraculous things happen that would have never happened had we not taken this journey. And people out there might think we're crazy. What are you guys doing? But check it out. So we get into just north of Dallas, and this guy that I met on Facebook said, he said this like 7 months prior, and we didn't communicate in between. He said, hey, if you ever need a place near Fort Worth to park for a night, let me know. We have an RV hookup at our place. And so this is no joke. It's like 3 p.m. And I just happened to remember that he said that. So I messaged him like, hey, we're coming through Fort Worth, and I don't think we were trying to get to Austin. I said, do you think we could crash for a night? Absolutely, you know. And then so we met him at his work, and then he starts driving down the road and bringing us to his place, and we keep driving and driving and driving and driving down these windy back roads into the countryside. And I'm trying to keep it cool, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, we're gonna die out here. You know, I love this guy. I just met this guy literally a minute ago in person, and now we're going to his house. And then we get to his house, and it's like, you know, something from a scary movie. I mean, it was a nice place, but it was like way out in the middle of nowhere, and we knew nobody. And I'm like, oh boy. So, you know, we stay overnight that night. We get up in the morning, and it turns out like his sister and his mom and dad lived there, and they invited us in for breakfast. It was like the greatest gift of love we could have ever received at that point in time. They just brought us in like we were family, and we fellowshiped and we talked about life, and it was like the coolest thing ever. And that story happened again. We went down to Padre Island, and I'll give a shout out to Dallas Holland. He's the guy on Padre Island we met up with down there, and we fellowshiped for a couple weeks. And we left there, and I was sobbing for like 20 miles as we drove away because we connected just on such a deep level. And it wasn't just him that was there either. We were also with Nathan and Chelsea Reynolds. And so we spent a couple weeks with, you know, all of us together, just fellowshipping, crying ugly tears, you know, over different things and working things out. And it was amazing. And so that is part of the why that has been revealed to me during this journey. And I know there are a lot of other families out there that are on this path too, and they don't know why exactly. And and there may be a greater purpose for this. We're ultimately looking for our home or where God's calling us to be. We weren't planning on being in the bus even 1 year, but we're coming up on a year, and it looks like we're going to be going into year number 2, and we don't have a place to call home. And it's unnerving sometimes. We begin to get weary, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show. And then the next day, the Lord will bring somebody by, and we just connect with them. We'll start fellowshipping, and it's just over and over again. The cycle keeps happening. And I could tell stories probably for a couple hours of the different ways we've seen the Lord work through this journey. And yeah, just I don't know where to kind of end it, but that's definitely been the greatest blessing we've seen. And just one more like possibility to why we're doing this is preparation. This might be preparation for something that's to come, and we need to know how to live remotely or off-grid, which we do now. Or, you know, maybe it's just for scoping out areas that we need to know about that in the future we may need or something. Or setting, I don't know. Chad, we talked a little bit earlier about the land of Goshen in Egypt, where the Israelites were safe, and or the Hebrews were safe, and you know, that could be something that we need to rely on in the future too. Safe havens, little Goshens, little appointed places for the appointed people to flee to in order for a place of refuge. So I don't know if we're called to set one of those up or what it is, but we're on this journey, and we're just praying each day that He would lead us. Same prayer, we'll go where You want us to go and lead us and do what You want us to do. I don't really. You said missionary a couple times, and I'm like, I don't feel like a missionary. I'm just
yeah, but you kind of are.
Just some guy driving a bus around, not knowing where he's going, you know?
Yeah, but you kind of are. I mean, you're so, and I said to you in our conversation, I do see that as there are guys like myself. You know, I'll just share this with you. I don't think I shared this with you, but my wife and I are wanting to do this. You know, when our youngest son now is a freshman in high school, and our thoughts have turned towards, look, when this one's through high school and he can live on his own, you know, and have a place to stay of his own and be an adult, her and I are going to do exactly what you've done. I mean, at least that's our goal. So we're going to put, you know, the stuff that we don't want to ever, be rid of, like pictures and family heirlooms or stuff like that. We'll keep that with family or in a storage, but we're selling everything, and we're gonna start touring too, whether we convert a bus or whatever. That's in our hearts and our minds as well. But I told you this even this afternoon, I think it was, that I think that's exactly why folks in our communities are doing this. I think they're just when geese fly north for the winter or south for the winter, they practice. They have practice flights. Geese more they're crazy here now, but it used to be there would be small groups and they would stay to themselves, whatever, and they would fly together. And then as winter approached, they would gather together into larger groups and they would take practice flights. They will practice flights from one place to another to get themselves strong enough for the journey that they're going to have to take to get all the way to where they need to go when things get rough where they're living.
Wow.
And I kind of see it like that. I kind of see these groups of people, like yourself, like the Reynoldses, and a couple other people that you and I mutually know together who are doing this. I think it's the Father stirring in our hearts to get people ready. Folks like you are going to have a lot of wisdom for folks like me to draw from, when we go to say, okay, so what do we need to know? What are the practical things, that we need to know? What are we going to run into? And also be there for people who are going to be taken probably by surprise suddenly. That's just my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
When they're forced to live that way suddenly, they're going to need people who truly love the Lord and love his people to help them and say, look, we got you. We can help you. You don't have to be without hope in this. We know what's going on.
Yeah.
And whether we know, where exactly that's going to, or exactly what that's going to look like when it takes place, and I do believe it will take place because the scripture says so,
Yep.
that we're going to need families like yourself. Now, here's the second thing I want to say. Knowing Adam's story here in his testimony, you guys that are listening out there, and there's a lot of you out there, don't you know, that are hearing this testimony. Do you have someplace near you, and you could put Joanie to work doing hair for a few weeks to a month or more, and you need a hand from Adam and some things, and you got a place to park an RV? His contact information has been displayed below the contacts here and in the show. Would you like to talk with Adam? Maybe you need Adam to help you through some things, and Joanie to help you through some things as a couple, to counsel through some of these issues. Maybe this is an issue in your life, and you're a couple out there that needs somebody who's been through this. Why aren't you reaching out to Adam and Joanie and saying, hey, here in a few months, can you come our way? Stay with us. We'll help you manage while you're here, but you can help us. Maybe that's in the cards. I why did I use that phrase, Father? Maybe that's in the path. Maybe that's in the path.
And Chad, I wanted to hit on something. You asked a question about income too, and you just kind of mentioned it. But
Yeah.
so there's a little salon in the bus. So Joanie does hair and makeup for that, or hair services. But she does hair and makeup for weddings as well. She also developed her own makeup and skincare line that we ship right from the bus all over the states. So it's website, and people order, we ship it to them. It's her own label on it. It's her own product. And then I've been doing odd jobs. I used to be a custom design jeweler. Currently, we're at this farm, and I am cutting wood right now. So it's awesome, man. I love it. But we just don't always know where our daily bread's coming from. Currently, we're trying to sell a building, so that's been holding us down slightly. And once that is gone, our ultimate dream, and I don't know how this all ties in. It may tie into the Goshen thing I was talking about, as a safe haven or something. But we'd love to have a retreat center at some point, or just a cabin on a lake in a woods somewhere where people can come to and reconnect, husbands and wives, kind of like a marriage ministry where they could come uh, and just not a stuffy like office, like you go to counseling and you sit there and it's so stuffy and it's not real life. It's we want people to experience life, out in God's creation and with one another and do different things and activities and then work through stuff with that and not just necessarily in an office talking it out. I think it's beneficial to some, but we kind of have this vision for that too in the future. And we don't know how that's all going to play out, but that's something that the Father's definitely placed on our hearts, especially with what we've gone through so far. So our bus, I think, ties into that, as well as, our past and marriage stuff. So I don't know how it all looks, but we're always looking at a map, like constantly. We're looking at a map and saying, this looks like a cool area. We should go check that out at some point. So that's kind of where we're at. We're currently in Arizona. We'll be here probably through all the cold months into March and April. And then we're going to start traveling again a little bit. But for now, we're just going to hunker down right here and make connections and fellowship with people around this area.
Well, Adam, I don't know if you've had a chance to even read any of the comments that are going on there, but you've been an encouragement tonight to many of the people that are watching here. They're resonating with your testimony and the things that you've said, and they've been encouraged. Michelle says we need that. There's others out there like Starla who just love your Minnesota accent, and I think you're hiding it very well tonight's show. You're being very professional, but it does come out in our conversations privately. He relaxes, I think, a little bit, and it's there. But I think people needed to hear your testimony for the bravery of it. I mean, like I said, I think there are many people who think about these kind of things. Hey, we're just gonna sell everything and we're just gonna travel, and it never comes to pass. But and they don't really know anybody who has been brave enough to do that kind of thing, right? And here, right before them, is a couple who's done just that, and it can be done. You said you've been on it for a year. Looks like you're going on to it in another year. And I've kind of hogged the conversation tonight, and I haven't let Ian talk any much. So we've got a little bit of time left. Ian, do you have any questions or thoughts you want to add in here, brother, before we get too far into it?
Questions? No. I had a few comments throughout, but I really enjoyed listening. Just a few comments. It was pretty cool how you talked about the first half of going through confronting issues. That's definitely something that needs to be brought up, bringing issues into the light, right? And I find it interesting that you started out talking about confronting issues, and then you ended it on the note of after obedience, now you're following an adventure. You see what I'm saying? There's a connection there between the two that I see. But I think it's really neat. It's very encouraging, not just to show people that they need to work on things and not ignore them, right? To go on God on things and look for accountability from others, things like that. But also having that trust in the Father to do this, because even though you guys wanted to do this and it's adventurous and you guys are having the fellowship and you're not sure of the end goal and you weren't planning on doing it this long, what have you, at the end of the day, you're doing this because you trust in the Father. You're not the teenager who had that idea, who the family sees as a loser, and you just making bad decisions. You're doing this because the Father led you to do it. And that's why it's working out for you. It might not always feel smooth, but it's working out because you're in an alignment, and it's really neat. You're talking about the adventure of meeting all these different people and having all these different experiences. I love hearing about that. I love hearing about people's spiritual walks and how it relates to adventures. So many times you see in the institutionalized churches, it's very dry. So I'm really glad you got to come on here tonight and talk about these things. I think Chad's right. I think you encouraged a lot of people.
Yeah. So again, I'm just going to reiterate. There's links in the descriptions below. You can find them on Instagram. They have a YouTube channel too, where they share some of the things that I don't think they've posted anything here for a little while because they've been on the move a little bit, but they've shared their adventures, kind of the stuff that they deal with or go with on an everyday. If you watch and follow Nathan and Chelsea Reynolds, they kind of do the same thing. where they're sharing their lives with you guys to be an encouragement and to teach in that. Just as the description says, it's an adventure. And as Ian has said, it's an adventure, but it came after obedience, right? That obedience, there's an excitement to life. Sometimes it's not always, everything's so smooth sailing, but adventure is there. I mean, the Father's there to show you he's strong enough to bring us through all that. We've reached actually the end of the show. We've been on now tonight, Adam, for the show. I just want to encourage everybody, like I said, any of those things, if you want to reach out to Adam, maybe you're considering doing this, reach out to him. If you send Adam some encouragement and love, folks, from Disputed Lands, the Disputed Lands posse out here, send them some love and encouragement. If you got a place where you can park an RV for a little while and you want to meet Adam and his wife and get to know them and their kids, shoot him a message. Adam is one of the neatest guys I know. I told Adam before we went live tonight, kind of like Ian, if any of these guys like Ian or Adam lived near me, I wouldn't get anything done because I'd be hanging out with these guys all the time. And we'd be sitting around talking like a bunch of old men on the porch, because that's exactly what would happen. We'd just be hanging around talking all the time and not getting anything done. So it's probably a good thing that they're traveling. I might actually get stuff accomplished. I wouldn't get anything accomplished otherwise. But I just encourage you to do that. Adam, thanks for coming on the show tonight.
Yeah.
And Ian, as always, brother, thanks for being there with me as a co-host. Ian is going to be getting instructions here real soon. Ian's going to be filling in as a solo show host. So we've just been getting him prepped for that. And I can't wait to see what Ian brings to the show as far as guests goes. So look forward to that, possibly even as soon as next week. Let's see, what is that? Yeah, possibly even as soon as next week, Ian will be doing a live show. So anyway, Adam, again, thanks for being on. Thanks, guys, for watching Take on the World TV. This has been Disputed Lands. I'm your host, Chad Schaefer, with my co-host, Ian the Duck Fiaducci. And this has been Adam the First Man. Until the next time, we'll see you later.
See you guys.